So, hey everyone, welcome to the 2021 UPUA Elections Executive Debate. Joined with us, we have presidential candidate Aaron Bowes and vice presidential candidate Najee Rodriguez. And the format here today is we will just be asking some questions that came through the submissions on the Google Forms to get the voice of the student body to be in contact with their potential administration coming up. So without further ado, we can get into the first question. So first off, would each of you, we'll go to Erin first. Would you want to tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. It's great to see everybody here tonight. My name is Erin Bowes. I'm a junior, majoring in international politics and economics with minors in business and the liberal arts and entrepreneurship and innovation. I'm in the Schreier Honors College as well as a Paterno Fellow. And I'm just so grateful and honored to have even the opportunity to run to be the UPUA student body president. I've been involved in UPUA since my freshman year. Much like any other student, I went to the involvement fair my freshman year and was weaving through the tables for hours trying to find out what I was going to get involved in. And actually, right when I was leaving, there was someone that yelled out saying, "Do you want to help better student life at Penn State?" I said, I should maybe stop and listen to what they're saying. So I stopped and I listened and I fell in love with the organization and the opportunity. So I joined freshman council and then got the privilege to be an at-large representative for the past 3 years, in which I've served on all 5 of the committees, as well as some ad hocs to look at the internal structure and kind of get to know the organization a little bit more. But honestly, my favorite part is getting to know the students. And I've gotten to know students and the university itself outside of UPUA too. So I've been involved in some organizations. I'm currently the vice president of Pan-Hellenic Communications for Omega Phi Alpha National Service Sorority. I serve on the executive board for Movin' On, which is one of the largest student-run music festivals. I'm in UPAC, or the University Park Allocation Committee. I've also been a homecoming captain, as well as a Thon Dance Relations Committee member, and I'm an active member of Alpha Lambda Delta National Honor Society. So I've kind of been involved in a lot of different things at Penn State and seen student perspectives and student organizations and the student life from a lot of different lenses. But the ability to give back to students and give back to the university is my favorite thing. And getting to fight for things like financial insecurity and gender equality, racial equality and social justice, and making sure that the educational institution itself has that institutionalized equality in it as well, are passions of mine. And I'm always thrilled and inspired by the work that Najee does. And I'm so grateful that he's joining me on this journey.
Thank you. And to Najee, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. To start, happy Thursday, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Najee Rodriguez, and I'm currently a sophomore majoring in national security and history in the College of the Liberal Arts. I'm also a Paterno Fellow. I'm in the Schreier Honors College, and I really am so excited to be running as the vice presidential candidate alongside Aaron this year. I am originally from Orlando, Florida, 15 minutes from Disney. My connection to Penn State started with me living in Allentown. If you are aware of where that is, it's the eastern side of Pennsylvania for about 4 years of my life. In that time, I was able to visit Penn State, and I really became interested in applying there and really starting over with my life after high school. I really have like an unwavering level of support for this university due to everything that it has provided me. And I hope to do even more for the university and the students that come from similar backgrounds as me. It's really a home. I think something important that's integral to who I am and part of my story is I'm a first generation college student, and I'm really supporting myself through college. That's really what allowed me to gravitate towards the UPUA as a whole, based on these experiences and based on the efficacy of what UPUA could do to improve student life, but student life particularly for students that have felt so left behind for so many years, especially students from underrepresented communities, especially students that come from low income backgrounds. ensuring that there's a voice and that there's representation for them in the rooms with administrators. That is something that has always been something that I've been passionate about and something that I hope to do further in this role. In my time in the UPUA, I've served as the first year representative, the College of the Liberal Arts representative, and of course the chair of the Justice and Equity Committee, which has been my baby since the very beginning. It's been years in the making, and I served on the ad hoc on outreach with current Vice President Pathical, and it's amazing to see it come into fruition. So a core tenets of my values and what I believe in are the alleviation of food insecurity, housing insecurity, and medical insecurity, general student poverty. Alongside that, I also serve as a Lion Ambassador, and I also am a member of the President's Commission on LGBTQ+ equity on campus and a member of the Presidential Leadership Academy. Alongside that, I currently work 2 jobs as a peer advisor for the College of the Liberal Arts, as well as an office assistant for the Office of Educational Equity. So alongside all of these roles, it's really contributed to my mission to really alleviate financial insecurity for students in real tangible ways, and also ensure that there is advancement of racial equity at a predominantly white campus such as Penn State. And I'm so confident in what Erin's able to do, and I'm more than grateful to serve alongside her in this journey, if elected, to enact tangible and positive change at Penn State. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.
Hello to you both. Thanks for being here tonight. You both talk about wanting to better student life and to make Penn State better. I'll start with Erin. Why seek the presidency of UPUA? What about that role enables you to accomplish the goals you set out for?
Absolutely, and thank you for the question. So as I mentioned before, I've served 3 years within UPUA, and in my time, I've been able to have a lot of different experiences in a lot of different roles. So while I've served as an at-large representative for most of the time, I've sat on all 5 of the committees, and I've seen how each of them works and been involved in student life holistically, and advocating for student life holistically that way. But I've also gotten to interact a lot with university administrators and serve on some task forces that have put me into some more like serious and in-depth conversations that are at the core of Najee and I's platform. So for example, I'm currently serving on the tuition task force. Affordability, of course, is one of the biggest student issues that we can advocate for, and making sure that the tuition, when we're talking about kind of the rationale for why the tuition is how it is, and breaking down, are we providing things and having a cost that relates to the value for students as well. And when it comes to transferring the things that I've learned within that task force to the presidential role, one of the roles of the president is to serve on the student fee board. So knowing and having knowledge of financial, going through financial lists and kind of allocating for and advocating for affordability is one of my main passions. On the other side, I've also this past year led the Women's Empowerment Roundtable, which has been one of the most fulfilling things that I've done at Penn State. It's a university-wide roundtable made up of students across the Commonwealth, as well as faculty, staff, administrators, even some female members of the Board of Trustees. And I've had the opportunity to engage in conversations just about student betterment and student life and overall benefiting the student community, but also doing that in a way that it's going to enact tangible change. So I've had the experience of listening to students, trying to bring students and their student voices to administrators. And that's always been a passion of mine, is to open more doors and empower more students to advocate for themselves. And I think my experience has put me in a good position to continue that and to really carry out the role of president.
Thank you, Erin. And to Najee, why seek the vice presidency?
I think, thank you for that question. I love it. I think something that's pivotal in terms of, seeking either position, and in my case, the vice presidency, is you have a significant impact on being that voice in the room alongside the president and advocating, of course, for the agenda and platform that you set forth to accomplish. I think personally, I relate a lot of this back to kind of my individual story as a whole. It's not talked about enough, and I think it's stigmatized, which is what I've been very open about, is the struggles that students face day to day. things that are ignored, inequities that are very prevalent, whether it's in the university or within our student government, things that need to be addressed. I know a lot of students that may come from low-income backgrounds and underrepresented backgrounds that never have felt like there's been a voice or advocate for them. So I take this extremely seriously in terms of being able to do so. From my own background, I've navigated, food insecurity. I currently have food stamps and of course, medical insecurity. I have Medicaid as a result of that. And these are real issues that no one talks about. There's issues that are floated from year to year that never are really enacted or cared about. And it's my goal to, of course, ensure that this is advanced, that this is advocated for in a tangible way, which we have done with the current administration, of course, initiatives that Aaron and I have pursued as well. Things that have alleviated these in some way, shape or form, big or small, the fears that students face. We're all here to get an education, right? And I think it's important to acknowledge that while we are here to get an education, there are very prevalent issues that are never fully addressed. There's never a person there's never an individual, for what I've seen, that's personally experienced these things, that has been in these positions to be able to be a staunch advocate on behalf of that certain student community. And that's something I definitely hope to change, especially with Aaron, who has been very vital in ensuring that advocacy throughout the year. And I think that's definitely something that can be explored in further detail as we approach, of course, the election, if elected. So a lot of my passions are derived from that. And especially like my background in general, like as a queer person of color, I think just having the representation in a position like this is very important for students alike that may have never seen that, and also a student that may have the personal background and experience to bring to certain matters and issues. Another reason is that I'd love to, of course, be able to chair General Assembly meetings, which is the responsibility of the Vice President. And it's something that should be done orderly, something that should have decorum, ensuring that the agenda is efficiently gone through in a timely manner. These are all things that I hold to a high regard, and I've had plentiful experience in that with the committee meetings that I've chaired. I also hope to bring, of course, the perspective of the Committee on Justice and Equity and all these issues and all these realms that weren't fully institutionalized in the UPUA to a new level, of course, when it comes to, of course, advancing that level of equity, advancing the work that's already been done this year and some work that's been done in previous years, and ensuring that that work is never forgotten and always advocated for. And that's a huge reason why I believe that it's important that a student like myself and many others can be able to run for these positions and, of course, advocate on behalf of their respective communities.
Thank you.
And so the next question, we'll go to Aaron first. What, in your opinion, is the role of the UPUA and other student governments here at Penn State?
I love this question. So the student government, we always say it, it's an advocacy organization. One of the main pillars that Najee and I have within our platform, and it's a main priority of ours, is to build relationships. And when you boil down student government to kind of the easiest and most comprehensible aspect, it really is building those relationships, getting to know students, getting to know them one-on-one, getting to know and be able to address different student needs, but also not being the person to say, okay, you have an issue, let me fix it. It's being, okay, you have an issue, how can I help you? And there's a big difference between that. It's empowering the student, and it's letting them also have that ability to advocate for themselves. So when it comes to building relationships, it's not just about reaching out to student organizations, which a lot of the times we can reach out to student organizations, and that's definitely something that we plan on doing. And it's important that we have those meaningful relationships right from the beginning. But it's also recognizing that there's some students that are really struggling, that don't have the time, the money, the availability to be in student organizations, but that doesn't mean that their student needs shouldn't be addressed. So Najee and I have kind of been saying this a lot, but student government and our roles specifically, we're not the mouth, we're the microphone. So a lot of the time student government, especially UPUA, gets kind of special privileges to be in different rooms with university administrators in some of the most pivotal conversations that the university makes. Just thinking back to this year with COVID, the student government was included in, and the president and vice president themselves were included in a lot of conversations, even the conversations currently with the social justice movement too. I think they've been opened a lot more up to different organizations, but it's kind of our responsibility to make sure that if we are invited to something, thinking that, Najee and I were only two people that have had our own experiences, and we've had our own ways of advocating, but sometimes we don't have the expertise on everything. So making sure that we're constantly including student representation and empowering students and opening the door for students to let them into the rooms. So our goal is mainly just facilitating advocacy while also actively advocating, but also making sure that we're seeing the university as a holistic view, and we're allowing students to be involved more in the decisions that are really affecting their lives.
Thank you. And now to Najee. What in your opinion is the role of the UPUA and the other student governments here at Penn State?
Alongside with everything that Aaron said, I think it's definitely to take an active role in the lives of students in any way that we can, and in any facet that we can, and while of course maintaining our general mission as an advocacy organization. So that of course means disseminating knowledge, disseminating information, disseminating resources, but when we can, also having hard and tangible relief to students that may be in dire need of it, or who may just generally benefit from it as a whole. Student government should be used as a resource for every student, for every student organization, as a tool to be utilized. If there is an issue that needs to be conveyed, we will convey that issue for you. Again, we are here to represent and advocate for. We're not the experts in the room at all. Not on many issues, but in particular, I think it's important to address the fact that we are here to ensure that we are learning and growing alongside student leaders who are the respective experts in those specific areas, and to ensure that everything that they're saying is conveyed to the necessary and appropriate administrators or individuals that they need to be conveyed to. We're the microphone, like Aaron said. We're just amplifying the message. I think in general, the UPUA has taken a new approach, a very good and progressive approach in this past year with initiatives that we've undertaken. For example, the Name Change Fund, having direct impact on the lives of students who come from those underrepresented backgrounds, and in this case, trans students, ensuring that there is that financial alleviation to receive a name change legally. That's incredible. The We Care initiative, which provides direct hygienic products to students, that actually alleviates a portion of the cost of college. Indirectly, but it still alleviates the cost. And that's what we've been exploring, especially our collaboration with first-gen advocates, ensuring that there is information with school supply packs to alleviate cost in that specific realm, while also advocating on behalf of that organization, providing information and resources for first-generation students as well, and just resources in general when it pertains to first-gen advocates and the services that they provide. That's what we should be doing. We also had a great collaboration with the Indigenous People Student Association, having a speaker series, and of course, just educating and advocating with Indigenous students, faculty members, just the community as a whole, and ensuring that everything that they were fighting for was amplified by the UPUA in every way that we could. Like, for example, the land acknowledgement. That should be the role of student government. That should be the new approach which was taken by this administration and future administrations going forth. We have the ability to do this, we have the funding to do this, and we have the infrastructure to do this. It's just a matter of what we decide to do with that. In this case, hopefully in the future, and I know with the current, and of course if Aaron and I are elected, the incoming administration, there will continue to be a very active role in the lives of students, a very tangible role, even stronger.
Thank you.
This question will go to Najee first. What is Erin's best characteristic, or in other words, in what way will she bring the most value as a UPUA leader?
Thank you for that question. It's a good question considering I'm running with her, so I hope I have an answer for that. Honestly, I've known Erin since the beginning of my UPUA career. So for 2 years, I've known her, I've seen from her, I've learned from her, I've grown with her in every way. She's been my guide in a lot of ways, and helping me understand the resources of the university, this particular administrators to go to. I really want to say her drive. There's so much that I could say, like for example, her wide plethora of knowledge and niche areas in the university, which is absolutely incredible, things that would benefit as a whole. That's the second, but the first would of course be the drive, the ability to get things done, to get to the finish line. So it's always one thing to have an idea, right? How do you enact that idea? What is the enactment of that idea? That's exactly what Erin brings to the table, and that's exactly what I've seen from her. Being able to have a mission, and having seen her do everything in her power to accomplish that mission, seeing things actually come into fruition, which is incredible. Because it's one thing, of course, to again have that basic idea or that basic principle of what you want to see, and then put it on paper with a step-by-step process and guide of how you want to see it done, and then seeing it done in this assembly and the accomplishments of what she's done in terms of her advocacy with alternative grading, and of course her emphasis on racial equity and advancing that. She's been a constant source of support and justice and equity as she sat on that committee. And she's provided a lot of help and insight in regards to that. So it's really inspiring to see her drive, her motivation to really just see these initiatives that she cares so much about come into full sight, into full reality. It's incredible.
And Erin, what do you think? Where do you think Najee brings the most value to your ticket?
How long do I have to answer? I could go on for the rest of the time. It's Najee has been my guide. I'll say that at first. His overall, one of his best qualities, I think, is his compassion and his empathy. His ability to not only take his own experiences, and I was going to use drive for you, so that must be us just connecting on the same wavelength, but his determination to do anything in his power to fight for a student and to put himself in the shoes of another student fully and be able to just advocate for and with them. I've never seen and never been more inspired by an individual in my entire life. He stepped into the assembly as a first-year representative, and you would have thought that he was an alumni. He had so much ability to learn quickly, as well as do things in a different way, and not be afraid to push against the grain, and not be afraid to find different ways to advocate. And I think as a student leader, that's so essential. You can't, it's not a formula that you follow as a student leader. There's different things that come up all the time, and there's the need to be flexible, and the need to adjust constantly, and the need to, if you hit a roadblock, being able to pivot. And he has an unmatched ability to do that, matched with his compassion and his empathy. He's a powerhouse.
And for this next question, we'll stick with the theme of Najee going first for these. So Najee, in your opinion, what's the biggest obstacle that you as student leaders face at this university? And furthermore, how do you plan to overcome these obstacles?
I think that's an excellent question. I would say the biggest obstacle we'll face is, of course, the bureaucracy, and of course, pushback potentially from administration on certain topics and issues. It's definitely something that I've seen in my experience as a student leader, specifically in the realm of the UHS, and especially something that's changed and evolved over time with the new director, luckily, specifically pertaining to a Center for Health Equity, which is an integral part of our platform. But I've seen that many student leaders have found frustration in really ensuring that their initiatives are seen and valued by administrators, and of course taken seriously. It's gotten a lot better, but again, it's of course comes down to the navigation of university bureaucracy, ensuring that there are the resources and the directions that are available to student leaders to be able to, of course, facilitate these conversations and advance the initiatives that are so important to them and their platforms. And I think in my personal experiences, I mean, I've had really exceptional experiences with a lot of the administrators who have really valued everything that we've done, especially with the banner initiative that's currently ongoing for, of course, to representation of underrepresented communities. the university is listening to us now. And I think that's something that's definitely been a change, and something that's been a very positive change in the past year. Of course, a constant obstacle consistently is, of course, just navigating the bureaucracy, knowing where to go, how to engage in dialogue to ensure that the initiatives are, of course, advancing in the way that they should be, everything like that. And I think that's so important, of course, to be able to learn from and, of course, push through. But I definitely think it's something that can be undertaken by Aaron and I in the future.
And to Aaron, what would you say that the biggest obstacle is as a student leader at the university, and how do you plan to overcome the obstacle?
Yeah, so I think Najee hit it right on the head with bureaucracy. I'm going to expand a little bit and also add a little different thing as well. So I think bureaucracy, but also as a student, it's easy to see that there's different student needs, and it's easy to see that the university should be putting up sustainable institutions to combat those student needs and to make sure that they're being advocated for. But there's always a learning curve when it comes to being a student leader, and there's things that we're not going to know right off the bat. And I think that we have to be willing to say, I don't know, which can be scary, especially in a room with university administrators. If they ask you a question, there's been many times that I've been the only student in a room of 15 administrators, and they ask me a question, and you have to admit sometimes, I don't know, but I can look into it. I'll give a more concrete example of that. So currently, something that I'm very passionate about is making sure that menstruators across campus have accessible access to menstrual products. So for an example, one of the organizations on campus, Days for Girls, has released a menstrual needs survey, which we partnered with within the Women's Empowerment Roundtable. And one of the things that they received as results from that survey was that 13% of menstruators on campus have either skipped work or class because they don't have access to menstrual products. That's a ginormous issue. That's a large part of our population, and they're missing class, which is one of the main reasons that they're here at Penn State. But when you bring that to university administrators and you say, let's get free menstrual products, you would think as a student that should be a no-brainer. That should be okay, yeah, let's implement that tomorrow. But then you learn more about the university contracts and how those, in the bathrooms where there's those fixtures that you have to put a quarter in, and that's how you get a menstrual product. There's a contract for that that's been long lasting. And even though I like to think that I might go to law school at some point, I'm not a contract lawyer. So having to kind of be in a room and navigate with administrators and even the university lawyer saying, you know this really well, and I know that you know that there's a roadblock to this, but let's get past the logistics for a second and let's think about, okay, a student really needs this and students need this. Can we make it possible somehow? Like let's work to make that possible, while also admitting that I might not know how to make that possible too.
These will be my final two questions. I apologize, I have to go to another meeting after this, but I want to make sure I get to this. First, to Aaron, how will you work to keep the UPUA transparent and accessible to the student body? And if it fits into your plans, will you maintain press conferences to maintain availability to the media?
Yeah, communication and advocacy is critical. It's key. That again branches off of our building relationships. Building relationships, especially with the press, is extremely important. It's a mutually beneficial relationship, because not only do we get to tell and report on what UPUA is doing and report on student needs, but it's a main way that we know what student needs are too. For example, the underground, the collegian, the onward state, they have their ear to the ground. They can interact with students. They report on articles. They have research. They do such great things. And a lot of the times I read Onward State and Daily Collegian and the Underground every morning, basically. And that's how I get to know about things like when there wasn't the ability to have pronouns in Canvas and on Zoom, Onward State had released an article about that with student testimonials in it. And student testimonials is one of the greatest ways that we can advocate, because that's a direct student story. So I think absolutely press conferences, or just finding the most efficient way that we can really directly talk with the press, and have that transparent and open relationship with the student body, and making sure that also the student body knows that we're there for them, and knows about the resources that we're providing, and knows about the things that we're doing. Because at the end of the day, a lot of the things that we're especially funding is coming from the student fee, which every student is paying. So they should know and have that accessibility and transparency of what we're spending it on and how we're helping them through that fee too.
And then to Najee, if elected as vice president, you'll be playing a very active role in General Assembly meetings. I want to ask you about communication and working between the branches of UPUA. How will you work with the other branches of our student government to advance student interests?
Right, and I'm really glad you asked that question, because I think it's good, especially that I've had immersive experience in the legislative branch. I know how the legislative branch operates. I know exactly the needs, the gaps that need to be filled in terms of communication. And I think it's so vital in order to have a cohesive and comprehensive organization that's united in its mission, that's aware of what the other branches are doing. It's important to be able to tie all those together. So when I, of course, think about that, I, of course, think about meeting with committee chairs, and of course, Aaron and I, of course, actively attending committee meetings from time to time, ensuring that we are kept in the loop, having these conversations in terms of what can we do to advance everything that your committee is doing, everything that your representatives are doing, ensuring that that conduit is always established. It's going to be hard to leave the legislative branch. I'm not going to lie. I've always been hands-on with initiatives, and I've always been very active in terms of tabling, which of course, I'm still going to do. It's not going away. But of course, just ensuring that, bills and resolutions, passing those, and, advancing legislation in general, like that's something that I was very passionate about, something that I'm very knowledgeable about in that realm. And that's something that will not be lost, and will instead be a strength, especially in my position as an executive, being able to bring both perspectives to the table. And of course, having an active relationship with the Chief Justice as well, to ensure that there is that tying together of all the three branches, and to ensure that it is a working unit, and that there is knowledge of what others are doing. I think that's so vital. And especially, I'm grateful to have an active role in the General Assembly in terms of chairing these meetings, and seeing the legislation that's brought through, and knowing best how to advocate for that legislation that's been worked on so hard by the representatives themselves, and of course, the committee chairs that have been brought, that are bringing this legislation to the table.
Thank you both for your answers. Jordan, will keep you rolling, but I wish you both the best in your run in the campaign.
Thank you, Justin.
Thank you.
Thanks, Justin. Okay, so it's just me now. So we'll go on to the next question. We'll start off with Erin this time. So given that you'll likely go on to serve and have the capacity to nominate 3 UPUA members, and 5 at-large members to the University Park Student Fee Board, can you just describe the Fee Board's mission and purpose, any of their ongoing projects, and any changes that you plan to make to the Student Fee Board?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll say this off the bat, I haven't served on the Student Fee Board, so I can't recite the mission right off the top of my head, but no, from interacting with Student Fee Board and also kind of watching the great work that they've been able to do this past year, it's about, I talked on this previously, every single student does participate a pretty large sum of money. It might not seem large to most, but I think it's around, I don't want to misspeak on this, but I think it's around $200 to $400, something around that range. And I'm pretty positive. Again, something that I'm going to learn. But making sure that that fee is going into hearings of different student organizations, and different parts of the university that need to allocate those fees to things like advancing mental health initiatives across the university. I know I sat in on a couple last year, one specifically being athletics, and wellness, and making sure that the athletics has the appropriate amount of fees, as well as I think there was one of the arts councils had come in to speak as well. I currently serve on University Park Allocation Committee, so I know the finances that way. So the student fee also, it's one of the ways that UPUA gets funded and the other student governments get funded, as well as UPAC. So one of the things that I really love that they did this year was add in that sustainability fee. It was added, they talked about it a lot this year, and I think it had just passed in the final funding. That's something that definitely needs to be implemented. A lot of organizations across campus would like to move into more sustainable things, but to be honest, like sometimes to move from a product that you've had for years into a more sustainable product, that takes funding, that takes money. And some student organizations don't have that money. And so making sure that there's accessibility for those student organizations to have that within, and even just other parts of the university like athletics, for example, to have that sustainability fee go and benefit, and overall making the university more sustainable, I think is a great implementation that they made this past year, and something that I'm really looking forward to seeing how that's actually put into the fee next year as well.
And to Najee, if you had the opportunity to sit on the student fee board, what plan or changes would you like to make?
I definitely think that having the opportunity to sit on the student fee board will come with great knowledge being learned and a lot of growth as well. It's very inspiring to see kind of how the environmental fund was implemented this year, which is very important, as Aaron said, continuing that advocacy and continuing the importance of advancing funding that's distributed to programs like that. And of course, being knowledgeable of where funding is being distributed to is also very important. So I think in general, I think communication with the UPUA as a whole and consistent updates with what's going on is definitely a change that I can tangibly bring to the table. Like Aaron, I've never sat on the student fee board, but I've heard much information from those who currently sit in the UPUA, and I've learned a lot from them. Again, like Aaron said, I think a lot of this comes with a learning curve, and especially comes with the idea to learn about where funding is allocated, potentially advocating for further funding to university entities such as the PRCC is also something that I'd love to look into and exploring based on need. It's dependent, of course, on the knowledge that we grow in the time frame before we are, of course, officially inaugurated into office. But I'm very excited to see what improvements can be made, how I can advocate for those improvements alongside Aaron, and of course, bring change, which I think is always necessary at this university.
Thank you. And so these next two questions, we'll go by each individually. They were the most requested questions from the forums. So the first one, we'll start with Aaron. How will you support the students through the return to campus process, hopefully navigating the post-COVID-19 climate?
Yeah, and this is a question that it's a very, very pivotal one that I know that right off the bat, we're going to be launched into a lot of these conversations. So to give a little context, I've been at home for the past entire year doing completely virtual, and I haven't been to campus since last year. And there's a lot of students that have experienced the same thing. For example, first year students, as well as some international students too. There's the need for increased flexibility with academics. So for example, as much as I love that we're being optimistic and the university is being very optimistic with bringing back in the fall, I think that we've learned in the past year that there's uncertainty at all times. So making sure that there is those plans within the university in case something were to happen, or even for individual needs, is really important. So for example, there's a lot of students that are immunocompromised or live with immunocompromised siblings. I personally live with an immunocompromised sibling, which is why I haven't been able to return to campus. And while we can be optimistic as a university and kind of look towards going towards full in-person learning, we also have to make sure that those student needs aren't being swept under the table. And through the reports that I've heard through Faculty Senate, it's very nice to hear that they are considering that as well. It's our job to also make sure that that's being implemented, and making sure that those students aren't being forgotten about. So another thing that goes along with that is making sure that vaccination clinics, especially, I know the BJC had recently just said that they're going to become a vaccination site, making sure that that is accessible to students and making sure that students do get vaccinated. Is health is, as we can tell from this past year, it's one of the biggest things that we need to prioritize. So that, as long as medical costs, making sure that students, there's students that have had COVID this past year that might have long-term implications. There might be long haulers. There might be post-COVID symptoms that they're still occurring. And we need to make sure that medically they're supported within their financials, but also through just resources of how to figure things out. Continuing things like still having a quarantine space and quarantine and isolation space and support for that as well, such as within the student advocacy and care center, and making sure that, you know, as much again as we're hopefully getting into that optimistic phase of post-COVID, it's still very real to a lot of people, and it's still impacting people, especially the long-term implications within health and financials.
Thank you. And Tanaje, how will you support the students through the return to campus process that's as is?
Yeah, I love that question. I think it's very important to be holistic in this entire process. So alongside everything Aaron that just said, which is so pivotal, ensuring that we keep students up to date as an advocacy organization with the current climate of the United States going forward, and specifically within the state of Pennsylvania. As we saw today, Rutgers announced that it made vaccinations mandatory for all students who return on campus, ensuring that if that is a directive that's issued by Penn State, that we, of course, are providing students with the resources coming back to know how to do so and know the guidelines and the restrictions that are in place when returning. I also think it's important to look at this holistically as well, because with coming back to campus, there are a lot of financial hardships that may come into play. It's a virus that's ravaged so many Pennsylvania families in terms of employment, in terms of finances, and it's important that we provide resources for the support bases. So, for example, the Office of Student Care and Advocacy and the Student Emergency Fund, ensuring that these offices and, of course, resources are disseminated to a multitude of students when they come back to campus. If there is, unforeseen medical hardship due to long haulers or just anything that may come from perhaps obtaining COVID again, and ensuring that, of course, if there are problems with, of course, parents being able to support students or students that are supporting themselves, ensuring that they are knowledgeable about the processes at Penn State and the resources that are readily made available to them. So, of course, it's important that the UPUA as an advocacy organization is steadfast with its advocacy in regards to students who may be most vulnerable, and assuring that there is a proper conveyance of the resources and information that is so pivotal for students to understand before returning.
Thank you. And we'll go back to Najee on first on this question. It was the most asked question, basically significantly on the Google Forms. Are you in a secret society? And if no, how will you ensure that there is no outside influence affecting UPUA advocacy?
Right. So I'm not in a secret society, and I have no plans on being in a secret society. The UPUA, obviously, hopefully from what people can understand from my personal experiences, has a specific role in advancing student life. That should be its only role. There's no need for external or outside influence. The UPUA is advocating for students, students in need, students of color. And I don't see why or how any secret societies would prevent or obstruct that goal that Aaron and I are so steadfast in realizing in our administration. But thank you for that question.
Thank you. And to Aaron, the same question. Are you in a secret society? And if no, how will you prevent any outside influence from affecting the advocacy done by the UPUA?
No, I am not in a secret society, and I do not plan to be. And I think preventing outside influence, if you're transparent, if you approach advocacy as equity, and making sure that every student equally should be advocated for, that's simply how you keep outside influence from involving into student government.
Thank you both for the answers. And the next question, we'll go to Najee first, as this can kind of relate to being chair of the assembly more. So with the UPUA, the nature of it being a non-political organization, what would you do to ensure that if there were any conflicting political viewpoints, to make sure that everybody can come together on the floor to better student life?
Thank you for that question. You're correct. As the chair of the assembly, it is my position and duty to ensure that there is decorum and order on the floor to advance the agenda of that given night. I want to iterate this here and now. There's no room for any disrespect in that assembly, whether it be hate speech, anything in that realm is completely unacceptable and will not be tolerated by any regards. That's obviously within the parameters of the rules and what should be understood by all representatives. As a student organization, as the UPUA, it is our job to ensure that there is advancements being done in student life. Every topic should relate to the advancement of student life. It's not a partisan organization, and that needs to be very much understood by every representative. I do know that you're probably looking for logistical kind of solutions to that being, and I'm happy to give them. There's certain mechanisms in modern rules, which I'm very grateful for, to ensure that that doesn't become an issue. Representatives should always understand that order must be maintained in the assembly, that there can be no signs of disrespect, specifically transphobia, homophobia, racism, general bigotry, not tolerated at all, and it won't be tolerated by me. And representatives are aware of the mechanisms that are in place to ensure that that does not happen, such as censure and expulsion. And I have been reading, of course, just in general with modern rules on how to navigate those procedures, because it's very important to have that knowledge and to ensure that knowledge is instituted in all representatives to make sure that it's a safe and conducive environment for all representatives of all backgrounds. That's something that I'm absolutely willing to facilitate. That's something I'm absolutely willing to convey. And that's something that I'm absolutely willing to put my foot down in every way, shape, or form. And I want that to be very clear.
Thank you for that. And to Erin, so obviously how would you deal with differing ideologies or viewpoints as president, not just within the executive branch or the legislative branch, but within the entirety of the UPUA?
Yeah, so I think Najee handled really thoroughly on the assembly room and decorum within the assembly room. But it's also important to acknowledge that we're both also leaders of an organization that does work outside of just Wednesday nights as well. So one of the main things, another one of our main pillars is institutionalized change. And that's something that we want to see at the university, but also within our organization internally as well. So currently, if you look within our constitution, and specifically within our mission, we don't have a diversity, equity, and inclusion statement within UPUA's mission, which honestly, I think we're 16 years too late for that. We need to make sure, and while Najee and I don't have the legislative power anymore to do that, if we're elected, that's day one of our main priorities is to work with the legislative branch to make sure that we have a mission that explicitly states that diversity, equity, and inclusion are a core tenet. And with that being a core tenet of our mission, making sure that we're carrying that out and making sure that every member of the organization is carrying that out. So whether that be, there's also the thing where we do have to advocate for every single student, and there's students with different ideologies and there's students with different beliefs, and we can't pick one ideology over another within advocacy, but we also can't be discriminatory, and we're not going to push, and we're not going to allow for things like transphobia, like homophobia, like racism, and I think that would be better executed as well, with that being a core tenet of our mission. But personally, both Najee and I have that as part of our personal morals and our personal vision as well. So it's about making sure that we're able to connect with the assembly and with general membership as well, to reaffirm that is, if being in the organization, that's got to be a core tenet as well. But institutionally making sure that UPUA is set up to have diversity, equity, inclusion at the core for years to come too is honestly, we should have done it earlier, and we're going to make sure that it's instituted for the future.
Thank you. And this next question actually kind of piggybacks right off where you just left off. How do you plan to represent communities that have typically been underrepresented at Penn State University?
Yeah, that's another big thing that Najee and I want to tackle. I think that there's a lot of times, there's been so many collaborations that we've made, especially this year, expanding our collaborations. But like I mentioned earlier as well, there's students that aren't represented by these student organizations. There's students with unique needs and individual needs that maybe we haven't heard from before. So it's about being creative and innovative in how we're connecting with students and making sure that we're not only just saying, oh, here's a forum in which you can come meet with us, but it's finding ways that we can put our feet on the ground and actually connect with students in different innovative ways. And that's how you learn about different ideology. That's how you learn about different student needs. And that's how you get to really do that. And advocacy, it's not about taking information that you hear and synthesizing it. It's about, like we said before, being the microphone and just not condensing it, not shape shifting it into the way that we think that it would work best in the ears of a university administrator. It's taking it and completely within the interest and within the mission of the UPUA as well, making sure that student voices are heard unabridged and unedited. So it's about putting ourselves in places that we haven't been before as an organization and as individuals, and also making sure that we're reaching those students that may not have that advocacy at the moment.
Thank you. And to Najee, the same question. How do you plan to represent communities that have typically been underrepresented at Penn State?
Right. So that's definitely the question that should have been asked years prior. I definitely believe, and I think that's something that that it has currently been tackled, and we will continue to even exemplify the tackling of that. We need to understand that we are just microphones. So speaking to Access Club, Lion Pride, Latino Caucus, Black Caucus, APITA Caucus, International Student Council, speaking the Indigenous People Student Association, speaking to these communities, having in-depth conversations, not just once every semester, but consistently to know what the needs are and how we can best contribute to achieving that goal or need. That is how we do that. We don't ignore these groups. And that's what the UPUA has done in the past, and that's been expressed by members of those communities. And that can't be acceptable anymore. That's something that needs to be tackled head on, especially with the advent of, this transition to Zoom. And there's so many methods of communication. There's really no excuse anymore. It needs to be consistent. It needs to be steadfast, and it needs to be it needs to be prioritized. We don't know every experience of every underrepresented community. We couldn't possibly. What we can do, though, is speak to members of these communities, to the student leaders of these communities, so that we can support them as an advocacy organization in whatever way they may need. We cannot just say that we know their needs. Okay, let's go into that room. Let's bring them into the room with us. Let's ensure that there is that consistent conduit and that door that's open. They're not going to be left behind anymore. They will be forward. And that's just the future of the organization that's already been set in stone as it is currently. And it has to continue to be like that. And I'm very confident with the Committee on Justice and Equity and the advent of that, and the governing documents changes that allows even more representation from these groups in the organization, ensuring that there is that constant voice in the room when these decisions are discussed, and making sure that these decisions aren't just decided by plurality of white students. That's extremely important. So I think especially when it does come to advancing the needs of underrepresented communities, that's the best way to do so. And it's what should have been done in the past and what we'll continue to do in the future.
Thank you for that. And we'll go to Erin on the second to last question we have. What is the most significant improvement that you would like to see in the UPUA in this coming 16th Assembly?
I'm not going to answer the mission because I think that that's something overdue. So that I think that shouldn't be the most significant thing, although I think that it will cause a lot of change. I would just like to see us connect with students better. And like I said, I think that a lot of the times, especially when we're bringing new representatives in or new members in, it takes a long process to onboard, and there's a lot of bureaucracy within UPUA itself too, and getting to know UPUA. I've been in it 3 years, and sometimes just learning UPUA can take a really long time. I don't know everything within UPUA. There's so many different rules, so many different things, and sometimes that can get in the way of student advocacy, and that can get in the way of pushing student needs. And we can get caught up in procedure all we want. We can get caught up in a lot of the different things, but I think we really want to make sure that we're making the organization efficient and run well enough so that those types of things don't get in the way of our purpose, which is to better student lives. So I think, especially within Najee and I's oversight of the executive branch, I think any way that we can better collaborate and integrate the 3 branches and making sure that they're really working efficiently together, and recognizing that they're all working for one goal, which is to better student lives, and they're not working for different purposes or different missions. It's one mission of UPUA and one mission for Penn State. Any way that we can help better facilitate that efficiency and that collaboration, I think will greatly strengthen the organization and the reach that we can have.
Thank you. And to Najee, what's the most significant improvement that you'd like to see in the UPUA for this upcoming assembly?
I said it already and I'll say it again. Immediate relief, which is one of our pillars of our campaign, which is providing direct and tangible relief to students, realistic change that students can see within their hands tangibly. And that comes in many forms. In terms of realizing, of course, health equity, food security, housing security, leading the path forward on that, I think is so important. And that's something that we've shown this year that we can do, that we've shown in the past that we can do. Our advocacy for STI testing by former Chair Clipstein. All of these issues like the We Care initiatives, the school supply packs, a Center for Health Equity to provide free physicals and subsidized prescriptions for students. These are real things that are in the works that will only be continued to be further advocated in this administration if elected. And I think that's something that students want to see. We have the ability to utilize our mission and our goal as an advocacy organization. And that's another way to do it. And it's a way that students are very receptive to, a way that students need now more than ever, given the current status of many people's financials with the pandemic. It's something that we can utilize to reinvent this organization in a very positive and institutionalized way. And that's something that I'm very excited to collaborate with in the legislative and advocate for on behalf of, because it's something that I'm so passionate about. And it's something that many representatives, including myself, have seen that have had a real instrumental effect on students and their lives, to see how happy they are when they see these things. And that's what's so important. And I hope to see the organization take that new direction and continue to take that new direction in the future.
Thank you both. And now we're on to the last question, arguably the most important question from the students. We'll start with Najee first. So Najee, what is your favorite creamery flavor?
This is a very controversial question, Jordan. I can't believe you've asked this. Personally, I'll say it. If it's hated upon, that's okay. Death by chocolate. I will say that I am lactose intolerant, but I do make these sacrifices because it's so vital and important. Thank you for this very hard-hitting question.
And to Erin, what is your favorite creamery flavor?
Hard-hitting question, Jordan. This is where Najee and I might fight, because mine's also Death by Chocolate. And if there's one last pint of Death by Chocolate within the creamery, we might have to just get into a little bit of an argument of who's going to get that one.
Well, I'm going to have to agree with you both. I am also Death by Chocolate. So thank you both for coming out tonight and answering all the questions that are coming from the students. And really ahead of these elections. Before going into closing remarks, is there anything that you'd want to say to the voters? Any final statements?
Sure. I just want to say we're here for you. We recognize that this past year has been one that might have affected you personally, within your family, within your financials, within your mental health. We know also that the transition outside of this year is also specifically hard. There's a lot of people that have been isolated, that there might be some social anxiety or some other complications that come with reemerging back into campus. There's a lot of things that we know that are going to be complicated, and we know that have been complicated for you. So please know that we're here to listen, and we're here to empower you to advocate for yourself as well. We want to help you and assist you, but we don't want to do it all the time for you. We want to make sure that you have the avenues to find those resources and find that support, and we want to be that one of those methods of support for you.
Thank you. And Najee, do you have any closing remarks?
Yeah, absolutely. Aaron has said this many times, but even though we are currently running unopposed, we are still running against the past now 15 assemblies to improve, to really change the UPUA going forward and going into the future. And more administrations will continue to do the same and build on the work that's been done before. It's so important that every student knows that we are here to take a very active role in their lives as an advocacy organization, hopefully a new and refined role as well, to have that direct impact and have that direct change. I also want to address that we are here to learn and to grow alongside you as well. We're not going to have the answers to everything. It's up to the students that care, who are passionate about certain topics, like for example, with sustainability that we've been working with a lot of students on and are very excited to really fill those gaps in our platform. We are here to learn. We're not going to have the answers for everything. And it's important that we do that because again, we are the microphones in this. We are here to listen to you, to advocate for you, to ensure that you are in the room with us and really advance the lives of all students. To those students specifically who have felt underrepresented and who have felt ignored by the UPUA, especially students who may be, suffering with financial, distress, I want to say help is definitely on the way. We hope to be innovative and we hope to be futuristic and impactful in your lives. We have plans that we hope to interact with the legislative to ensure that is exactly what happens. So you are not alone and you will not be forgotten. This is something that's very close to my heart. It's something that's very close to Aaron's heart. And all I would encourage you to do is exercise your right to vote and vote on March 31st. And thank you so much for listening and having us today.
Again, I want to say thank you to both of you for coming and answering all the questions. I know the commission appreciates it and the students as well. So to everybody watching as well, thank you. Whether you're on the Facebook Live right now or you're going to be watching on the YouTube at a later date, thank you. To the Daily Collegian, I would like to say thank you for covering this and really all of the UPUA's events, whether it be the legislative town halls or just the General Assembly meetings. And to everybody else, Election Day is on March 31st. The polls open at 12 a.m. They close at 9 p.m. And be sure to vote on vote.psu.edu. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, everybody.
Thank